Welcome back to 4-Wheel Builds, and today I've got a video for you showing you how to perform a rear Volkswagen T-Cross disc and brake pad replacement. Now before we do any work at all, first of all, please chock your wheels diagonally opposite to what you're working on. We are working on the rear right hand side, so chock the left front side. And for good measure, I'll also chock the front of the right hand side as well. Now before we start, you'll need this tool. You should find it in your boot, and it is to remove these nut caps. Now use your 17mm socket and your breaker bar to break loose these nuts. Now if you have an impact wrench, you can use that to then take off the wheel. But before we do that, obviously we've got to lift the car up. The lift point for the jack should be marked on your car. Marks such as this are very, very similar. Now, as soon as you take your wheel off, put that wheel underneath your car to make sure that you have something that will hold the car up in case the jack fails. Now here are the reasons why I wish it's changed in these discs. There's metal missing from their face. I'm not quite sure as to how that's happened. This car's only done 50,000 Ks. My assumption is, because obviously this was a crash damaged car, maybe it was sitting on an auction for quite a long time, the pad, I don't know, rusted to the actual disc, and then when the car was moved, it just ripped some chunks off. In addition to that, there's very, very big, I guess, gouges in the disc itself. Not quite sure if you can see. For a 50,000 kilometer car, I would not have expected that. So I'm not quite sure. Volkswagen, you tell me, what's wrong with these discs? As you can see, what we have here is a parking brake cable, which we need to get loose in order for us to be able to take the rest of this caliper off. Then we actually need to take the caliper off, and then lastly the caliper bracket. And we'll need to hang the caliper on some bungee cord to make sure it's not actually hanging on the brake lines. And then lastly we'll take off the actual bracket that holds the caliper and the pads. And then as the last thing, we'll take off the actual disc. Okay, in order to get started, we need to go inside the car and release the handbrake. You also need to undo the brake reservoir cap. With the handbrake released, we now need to lift this lever up and remove the cable. And now what you need to do is actually push these plastic tabs in to be able to pull this cable through out of this bracket. Okay, and now we've got the cable released. We can move on to removing the actual brake caliper. Prepare yourself a bungee cord to be able to hang up the actual brake caliper on the cord. I usually just wrap it around the spring. You could use zip ties or any other method, or even put a box underneath just to make sure that you're not straining these lines here. Okay, now let's get our 15mm and 13mm wrenches and start undoing the bolts that hold the actual caliper in place. Coming with a pry bar from the rear and work on getting those pads loose. I believe I've got them loose, so let's remove the bolts. A little bit of to and froing, and there's a brake caliper. There's a brake caliper and there's a pads. As you can see, they are quite worn, and most importantly, I've got these grooves that you can feel on the disc in them as well. And how's the rear? The rear is not too bad, it's quite smooth, so it's only the front facing one. Okay, so now let's proceed and get this caliper bracket removed, and that's, you need, there's two M14 bolts right at the back here, which you need to undo to get this off. Now before we go ahead, let's get some WD-40 on there, because they tend to be stuck on real good. These M14s are stuck on quite good, so you might need a persuasion tool to help along. And with those two bolts undone, we now got the caliper bracket off. And the disc is a fairly simple affair. There's one T30 screw that's holding it in. Give it a whack. And there's our disc. Well, the hub is really plain, so that doesn't need any cleaning. But next, what you should do, or what you need to do, is actually get a wire brush and clean off these guides. So these are the actual areas where the brake pads glide along. So let's clean these up, and then we'll use some copper grease to grease them up. These are relatively new, so there isn't much rust on these, but they do tend to get quite rusty. Okay, we've got them cleaned up, so let's go grab some copper grease and put some grease on there. Okay, so this bracket is now ready to go back onto the car. If you see that the actual hub is rusty, then clean this up with a wire brush as well. The next step is, in my view, the most difficult or most tricky part of this whole operation. We need to push the cylinder back in the caliper. How do we do that? With this tool. So we have this, I guess, adapter, which is in this case number 6, and that the two prongs that are on this adapter need to go into the slots that appear on the actual caliper cylinder. So if you put that in there like so that it actually holds, then you need to install the actual tool. Just keep on going as far as you can. That will just make it a lot easier to put the brake pads in. Once you're done, just use, in my case, it's a 22mm wrench. Just undo this nut, and that will allow you. Okay, and our caliper cylinder has been pushed back. So now we're ready to start putting everything back together again. Whenever you buy new discs, they come with a protectant oil on them. That prevents them from rusting in transport. So just use some solvent to wipe the disc area clean. Now on the other side. And now that we've cleaned it up, our disc is ready to go back onto the hub. Now I do have brand new screws for the disc in the Brembo pack that I bought, but I'm actually going to reuse the same screw that we had. I like these better because these are hex. Just a simple affair using a TX30. Get that in. And there you go, that's done. Now in order to stop the new brakes from squealing, let's put some copper grease on them. And spread that around. And that will prevent any noises coming from the brakes. Okay, so now let's get our M14 bolts and our brake bracket. Done these up as much as I could. So now let's install our brake pads. Now the brake caliper. With the Brembo kit we've got new bolts, so we'll get those installed. Okay, once again, let's grab a 15 and 13mm wrench. Okay, so the top and bottom are done. So now it's just a matter of feeding a handbrake cable through and getting that clipped on. So take a look at it, guys. A job well done. Let's grab the handbrake cable, just make sure it locks up. Okay, now I can't turn this. So, job well done. So now let's put the wheel back on, get the car on the ground and enjoy our success. Okay, we have a success. That wheel is done. Now let's move on to the other side. And just like that, guys, we were able to get the disc and the brake pads replaced. The other side that has been done as well. I hope you enjoyed today's do-it-yourself guide and you found it useful in dealing with the brakes on your Volkswagen T-Cross. Share your comments if you think there's other ways or better ways you could actually do this. I'm always happy to learn. And if you did enjoy it, leave me a like, leave me a comment, consider subscribing, it's going to help me and a shout out enormously. And I'll see you guys in the next episode of 4 Wheel Builds. See you guys then.